Hello, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations 16. Before we get started with the usual format, a friend of mine I train with pointed out that might actually want to do the host thing and tell people what BJJ Meditations is all about. Shout out to Nick. Nick, thanks for reminding me to do my job. I'm glad no one needs to remind you to do your job, otherwise, we'd be in big trouble. Um, so, what is BJJ Meditations? BJJ Meditations is my training notebook made public. These are things that I've been writing to help navigate my jiu-jitsu training since I started training about 7 years ago. And ultimately, I decided that while they're helpful for me, they might be helpful for other people too. Um, so why not make them public? I think what I do differently in jiu-jitsu is that yes, jujitsu, I came to it. I came to the pure martial art of jujitsu, wanting to master this martial art, wanting to learn how to defend myself, wanting to stretch myself physically, improve myself physically, mentally. But also, I wanted to improve my life thematically, holistically. And I think that jujitsu, it reveals who you are and where you can grow in ways that nothing else really does, with the exception, I'd say, of becoming a husband and becoming a parent. Those will certainly reveal your deficiencies too and show you where you need to grow. But in terms of purely physical pursuits, jujitsu, it's going to show you where your weaknesses are. And those weaknesses may be physical, they may be mental, they may be psychological, they may even be spiritual. And hey, spiritual, that might be a little bit of murky or mushy territory for you, but BJJ Meditations can be a murky and mushy place. So strap yourselves in, or maybe this just ain't the place for you. Anyway, BJJ Meditations is greatly indebted to the work of the Stoic philosopher and Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who wrote Meditations. Meditations began purely as his journal. There was never any intention of meditations being public and shared with the world. And just by the stroke of luck, somehow it fell into the hands of historians, and we were given this wonderful window into the life of this remarkable man. But I think what makes meditations particularly remarkable is just that this was essentially his private journal that became a public artifact and has helped countless millions of people for centuries. Will BJJ Meditations do the whole thing? I think it would be a bit hubristic of me to say yes, but I think there are a lot of common struggles that grapplers go through, and a lot of them are going to be dealt with in this venue, and hopefully the way that I approach them is useful to you. But I do want to clarify something, and this is something that I find myself saying in conversation to people when they ask me about BJJ Meditations, and it's that, you know, when I say you in BJJ Meditations, I'm really talking to myself. I do a lot of finger pointing in these meditations, and the fingers pointed squarely at myself. This is really kind of airing my dirty laundry in public, showing where I need to grow, and maybe that exercise is useful to you. Maybe it reveals where you need to grow. If nothing else, I'm posing these questions publicly. I'm not trying to posit answers publicly. I'm hoping to start a conversation, to start a discussion, to truly show that jiu-jitsu can be so much more than just a martial art. So with that being said, we will now return to our regular programming and get into this week's meditation, number 16. To borrow an idea from the late, great Hunter S. Thompson, this week's meditation is a true story. And it's true in the sense that it's a story, and I know it's true because I made it up. And it's called The Visitor. A man, long and lean, walks out of the pre-dawn and into the neon light of a jiu-jitsu academy. A visitor. He's all California sun and surf, amplified by 380 milligrams of caffeine. Warm-ups begin. The unofficial ones where people stretch and roll around and groan in the minutes leading up to class. The visitor asks about the official warm-ups, a topic of controversy. The instructor explains the plan. The visitor responds, "At my school, I put everyone through a stretching routine. I could do that if you'd like. The instructor laughs and says no thanks. A class follows. It oscillates between structure and freedom, the way Jiu Jitsu oscillates between structure and freedom. The visitor struggles at times. At others, he veers off course, offers opinions to his gracious but knowing training partner. When he rolls without conviction, but he doesn't know that yet. Will he ever? He knows only the good vibe's affect that he has cultivated. Class ends. Have you been to the temple up the road? The visitor asks. It's amazing, man. They have a 50-foot gold statue out front. People come all the way from India to see it. You've got to go see it. You mean the one the FBI raided a few months back? Says the instructor. I know, says the visitor. Slave labor or whatever. But it's beautiful, dude. I've never seen anything like it. And neither has the instructor. So this true story, true in the sense that it's a story, and I know it's a true story because I made it up, is based on a number of experiences I've had traveling all over the country and dropping into different places and training. For a while, I was working for this medical publication, and I would go to medical conferences all over the place. And whenever I could, I would try to drop in at the local school. And my experiences ran from good to bad to ugly and everywhere in between. Some places, the hosts were very gracious. Other places, and this happened more frequently than I'd like to admit, I definitely had a target on my back. For those of you who haven't met me in person, I'm 6'2", 180 pounds. You know, I look every bit the part of a dad. You know, I'm not really a super threatening or imposing person, but everywhere I went, it you know, for the most part, it seemed like instructors would handpick the people I was going to roll against, and more often than not, they ended up being some of the biggest, baddest, meanest, nastiest dudes in the room. And then every now and then I'd have really great experiences too. Like I trained at this one small school in New Orleans, and we trained pretty hard. And then after that, we went out for beers, and they told me all about the city. It was fantastic. You know, it was one of those nights training that I'll always remember. But, you know, you get the sense that wherever you go, every school has a different culture and a different vibe. And those cultures can be toxic or they can be really wholesome. And I think that as an instructor in a school that I think has a very good culture, you really appreciate just how much work goes into maintaining that culture. And when you visit a school that has one, at least I tend to be a bit more deferential to what's there because I see the value in what they're providing. And every now and then, man, you just get a visitor, somebody from the outside who they're just on a completely different wavelength, and they're either not attuned to what's going on in the room, or they're coming from another place that has a very different way of doing things. And it can be jarring. But it raises this larger question of, well, how do we know that the culture of our school or a particular school is sound? How do we know that it's something to be revered? How do we know it's not something that should be transformed? It's this fine line that we have to walk, and this constant juggling act that we have to play out. You know, the alternative is to just be completely socialized and to not question these things and to just run with the herd. And obviously that has serious consequences. We need only to look back through the history of the 20th century to see what happens when the herd mentality takes over. But at the same time, you know, we don't want to destroy or kind of carelessly denigrate something that has been established. So it just brings this question to my mind of like, how do we remain attuned to this balance in jiu-jitsu? How do we walk this line between deference and respect for customs and for culture and the need to keep things fresh and new? But I don't know, clearly in my mind, the visitor in this story, was on one side of the line and he had kind of gone too far. But curious to know what you think. Feel free to let me know however you'd like. And, you know, I'd be remiss also in my hostly duties here not to just say thank you for listening or watching. just so you know, this podcast is available in numerous formats. You can listen to it, as I just said, as a podcast. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and like a dozen other platforms that I've never even heard of. We're also on YouTube. If you want to see just how threatening I look, you can check me out on YouTube. And we're also on this wonderful platform called Mirror.xyz. Mirror is on the Ethereum blockchain. If you're into crypto and NFTs, that's the best way to support this podcast. So each one of these essays is actually available as an NFT on Mirror, and I want to say they're like $15, so not a huge amount of money. So if you really enjoy what I'm doing here, that's the best way to support it. And at some point down the road, depending on how big this gets, I might do something where if you hold a BJJ Meditations NFT, maybe you're part of some special community, or maybe you get access to some sort of giveaway or something like that. It's really too early to say, but that's kind of where my mind is at. So yeah, it's mirror.xyz/josephhannon.eth. And I know that's a mouthful, so it's in the show notes if you're curious. And also all of these posts go out on Instagram as reels. If that's how you prefer to watch and listen, go for it. We're BJJ_meditations. And if you're really into my writing in general, I do a lot of non-Jiu Jitsu related writing, all of which you can find sort of gatewayed on Instagram. I'm jhannon86. That's JHANNAN 86. Yeah, and thank you very much for listening. I'm constantly just in awe of how quickly this thing is taking off. If you really like what you're hearing, reading here, please listen, review, like, subscribe, and share. Especially the sharing thing, man, it's surprising to me how often these reels are getting shared as messages. I don't know. You all could be laughing your asses off at me for all I know, but I'd like to think that maybe you're getting some value out of this too in the process. Who knows? You can tell me. But yeah, thank you. And we'll see you back next week for BJJ Meditation number 17.